Welcome everyone in this new episode of Let's Talk AI. Today I'm very happy to be with Joe Reis. Could you describe yourself in a few sentences?
Yeah, recovering data scientist, data engineer, data architect, co-author of Fundamentals of Data Engineering, podcaster. I could probably keep
You have
going on, but I'll shut up. So
the name of your show, the name of your podcast is The Morning Talk, or what was the name?
yeah, it's a Monday morning data chat, which is I guess if you're in Europe, it's Monday afternoon. So, but oh
And
well.
so, what do you talk about in this podcast?
Yeah, the podcast it's very open ended. It's unscripted. I mean, the whole goal is to talk to people that I think are just fun to talk to in the data industry, frankly. And
Mm,
it's definitely there's not really a set type of person or or background. It tends to vary quite a bit. We have everyone from people who do data management to taxonomies to venture capital to
mm,
um, geez, basically everybody. So it's
wow,
but the cool thing is it's become kind of an institution in some ways. We stream it live on LinkedIn and YouTube, and definitely got a lot of people showing up every week to listen to us talk. So it's fun.
that's awesome. There are so many things I would like to ask you. Start asking questions. Because you write a book, you have a podcast, you're doing so many things, as we can see on the video if the people are listening to us. You also have your whole set of music production and DJing behind of you.
It's pretty
uh,
nice. Yeah.
so so maybe I would like to ask you a first question that is very general, and then I would like to be maybe more technical, ask about your experience. But how do you combine everything that you like in your life?
Well, that's a great question because I do a lot of other stuff too. Like this morning, I was rock climbing at the or bouldering at the climbing gym, and
Awesome.
um, and try and get out and travel around and hike around in Salt Lake City where I am, and and do stuff with my kids and a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, there's a lot going on, but I don't know. I think I've just arranged my life where all the things I want to do are things I want to do, and a lot of things I don't want to do, I don't need to do them. So it's
that, that
that's a
sounds
good
super
balance.
easy. But like, did you did you were at a point where you like had goals on the list, like life goals, like things that you really value, and through the years you find some balance and find a way to do all those things. Like, was it very hard to achieve doing all those projects and parallelize all those different things that one can think, how do you do so many things, but in the end you manage to do all of them and being successful in all of those tasks?
I don't think it's so much goals. Like I really don't have that many goals. It's kind of a weird thing to say
Hmm.
because from the outside in, it would seem like I have a lot of goals, and there are a handful of them, but it's more like um, I think over time, if you just keep setting habits that kind of lead you to where you want to go, and I think more importantly, lead you to what lead you away from what you don't want to do. That's
Mm,
I think is more important.
mm,
Um, because what I notice is the what keeps people from achieving a lot of their goals isn't so much a lack of persistence. It's all the things that usually get in their way, and these things are the things that get in your way are typically of your own doing, right? Like um, just everyone's got their own thing going on, but there's a lot of things that just you shouldn't be doing, and so if you need to get rid of them, then you probably should. So
mm. Yeah,
yeah,
like maybe sometimes people try to do very good at everything, but they would need to focus more on just the things that are very important. Like there is this book, like the one thing, and you just need to
yeah.
focus on the top priority thing. And if it's second, then just do the first one every time in the morning.
It's just about prioritizing. Yeah. And I think like Warren Buffett has this notion of a avoid at all cost lists, which is, I guess, as the story goes, he was talking to his pilot of his plane and, kind of asked him, you fly me around a lot. And, I'm curious what are your goals? What do you want to do? And I don't know whether this guy knew or not, but anyway, Warren just said, why don't you just list out like, the top 25 things you want to accomplish in life and prioritize them. And then, basically anything that's below number five, just cross it out and avoid it at all costs, and really focus on the top things that you want to be doing.
Hmm.
And so that's I think it's a good litmus test because it's the power of saying no to things too that it's allows you to say yes to a lot of things. And I think for me, it's I've been able to say I've gotten better at saying no. I would say to a lot of things that I just know are like waste of time, and so even though it seems like I have a lot of things going on, that a lot of these are the things I intend to really want to do and do them really well, and so that's a big difference. What I see a lot of times is people want to jump into stuff and um, but I don't know what maybe they don't have the right motivations for it, or maybe that they don't have their why, so to
Mm,
speak. And so but
mm,
and so what usually happens is they just kind of spin their wheels, right? Like I see this a lot, and we can talk more about this in a bit. Like people getting into data, like I think you can make a lot of money in this field for sure, and there's it's good work, but I think you really got to like it, and then know what you want to get out of the experience too,
mm.
and just have a really strong reason for doing this. 'Cause there's a lot of other options in this world, right? I mean, there's
Yeah,
basically countless options of things you could be doing, and
like DJing, for example.
like DJing, you could do that, and I did that for a while. I mean, you have a musical background too, it sounds like, and so and um, and it's fun, but
Yeah,
I think you just pick the things that have always been a part of you too, and um, if you like them, then keep them around. So
yeah. You talk about finding your why. I feel that um, this is very something that I
sorry, I
really
got a cold right now too. So but,
no
yeah,
problem.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
No, no, no. But I feel like you talked about like finding the why and like having this to do list and being able to say no. I feel like a lot of us get caught up by not being able to say no, and like if you're not able to say no at some point, you will lose so many opportunities. This is just my point of view from what I've heard, because I don't feel like I have yet enough of experience to talk about. Maybe you can confirm.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you get as you get older, you get better at saying no to things. I mean, hopefully, I mean, I mean, there's so you got to weigh whether or not what you're saying no to is whether what's the opportunity cost associated with that too, because sometimes
Hmm.
maybe there's something there that you might be missing too, and so it's just classic like type 1 and type 2 errors and stuff. But the most precious thing you have is your time, right? And
Mm,
so um so I mean, if you could pick out like what your perfect day would look like, and you could make your life kind of look like that, then I think you've won in life.
mm,
Because it's not about money really. It's to me, it's about really um, how are you able to spend your time, you
mm.
know, and use that, because that's your most important asset at the end of the day.
Mm.
So
We will get into like your background, professional background, and data in a few seconds. But I have so there is this typical question of how does your day look like when you do
mm,
interviews and when you talk to people. I would like to ask you this question, like how does your day look like? But I would also like to ask you like the evolution of how you organize your day from when you was in your 20s, for example. Like how did it evolve? Maybe it's, I don't know, like
yeah,
a
I mean,
throwback of how you've managed to change how your day is organized.
I've always gotten up really early, and so I would say that's always been a constant thing. Is I just wake up super early. It doesn't seem to matter what happens. Jet lag doesn't seem to affect it. Going out and excessively partying the night before doesn't seem to affect it at all. I just seem to get up super early, and so I think that sets a good tone though for the rest of the day. So I mean, I think I've always just made it a habit to focus on there's this old book called, like, what was it called, Eat That Frog, and it's
Mm,
just about doing the hardest thing in the morning. It's sort of like that
yeah.
one thing. I mean, a lot of these books just tend to recycle the same things, which is just prioritizing and doing hard stuff in the morning, and or whenever you're most effective. And so that's how I've always approached it. I wake up, read for about an hour, probably go um, work out or something like that. So this morning I was just bouldering, which is what I do a few times a week. So yeah. And then what else? Yeah, just basically get to nowadays. I'm just basically in full on writing mode right now. Like, I've kind of taken a step back from even Ternary, my business, and just focusing on just writing and working on a new book right now. So a lot of my time is spent just researching and writing, and that's literally about all I do all day. And then I do a few shows, but I do treat writing as a job. So there's a structure to it. There's certain expectations I have every day that I need to accomplish, and that's about it. So, yeah. So that's yeah, and hang out with my kids, obviously, and what else? That's about it. So,
Mm.
but
So like get the hard thing in the morning, um, read, take some time to read every morning, and then you exercise a few times a week. Then you do what you need to do. So actually, it's writing, but I will ask you about your career
yeah,
and your professional life in a few moments. And then you get some family times, quality times, and throughout the
yeah,
week you do some shows. Awesome,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's about it. That's been the routine for
awesome.
the past bit. So yeah, it's pretty fun. But so
Thanks for sharing.
yeah,
And so let's dive in your background and in your years of professional life. How
yeah.
did you get into data? And yes, how did you get into data?
I mean, I guess from an early age, like I grew up in the '80s and the '90s, and I was a teenager in the
Mm-hmm,
1990s, and so at that time it was really interesting. I mean, so I'd always been around computers and whatnot, but I had a really early access to the internet. I'd say I got my internet account like I don't know sometime in the early '90s. I can't quite remember, but what was interesting back then is it was before the web, right? So it was just the internet, and that plus going on to bulletin board services and stuff. I think it just had an early grasp of maybe the possibilities of the online world. You got to remember at the time that was a foreign concept to a lot of people. A lot of people thought the
mm-hmm,
internet was going to be a fad and just go away, but I mean, here we are. Like
mm-hmm.
you're in Madrid, I'm in Salt Lake City, and we're talking over the internet. So obviously, but yeah. So I
That's
guess
wild.
then for spent a few years just kind of bumming around. Frankly, I was just you know rock climbing, and that was about it. Working odd jobs. As a labor for quite a while, and kind of, in some
Was
ways,
it
I kind
in
of.
data engineering or was it in a?
Oh no, no, no! I was just hanging out, man. I mean, in the late '90s, I was just traveling around, just rock climbing. That was about it. So, it brought me to Salt Lake City, though, which we'll get into data now, because I decided well, we'll go finish my college degree. I actually started pretty young and in college and dropped out, but yeah, I decided to go to University of Utah. Studied mathematics. Had always been interested in getting a job, like doing analytics and kind of predictive modeling, and so I was training to be an actuary, and decided I probably didn't really want to go down that path, and so got a job. My first job was working at a really fast growing company, and what was I doing? I think my first thing there was call center analytics, and so and then that morphed into doing sales and marketing analytics, and which analytics at the time also incorporated, I would say, what we call data science now. It's like a lot of forecasting, a lot of pricing modeling and optimization. A lot of just stuff that nowadays I think you lump into data science. But back then there was no
Mm-hmm,
term for it. It just called you, I think my term was a numbers guy, and so my job was basically, I think within 3 months of working there, I was sitting outside the CEO's office because he picked me to basically be his right hand person and help him drive the business, through numbers. And so that was an interesting experience where revenues had doubled every year, and it was just being on a rocket ship. So it was interesting too, just because I got to learn how to apply data to solving business problems,
mm,
uh, you know where it counted. And back then too, it wasn't one of these things where you had the luxury of kind of like now, we can get into this in a bit too, but I was actually just writing an article about this where I feel like the last 10 years, a lot of data teams have been formed where maybe they aren't really adding any value. But I'd say back then, because you're so attached to the business, like you really had like a good feedback loop
mm,
to figure out if you're providing an ROI on what you're doing or not. So that was pretty
mm-hmm,
cool. And then kind of carried that forward to a few other companies doing forecasting and mainly, which is say the thing I was known for quite a bit. And then say around like the was it 2011, 2012, started talking to some people about joining a automated machine learning startup. And so at that time, I mean, the um, machine learning, I think, was now becoming a viable thing. 'Cause, you had GPUs and
mm,
technology that could enable it back in the day. I mean, I'd always had an interest in machine learning and AI, I think, more in particular, but it just wasn't really viable back in the day. And
mm-hmm.
so, but but now seem to be. And so joined that and that startup, and I think so. Basically the whole problem was like that was supposed to solve is just give us any data set and we'll give you predictions on that or classifications. And what it made me realize really early on was the algorithms was actually maybe the easy part. Because back then it was using like ensemble learning and um, you know support vector machines and that kind of stuff. This is before deep learning. So,
Mm-hmm.
but quickly realized too that a lot of the problems were engineering related. So I'd built early on a very like a automated feature engineering um, program, and so it would basically save a lot of our these math PhDs we'd hired. They would just sit there and for days just going through and feature engineering and figure out automate that. And so that was pretty cool to see because that made me realize, okay, it's like a lot of problems around machine learning were actually just engineering problems to make it work in production. Same with like hosting models and putting an API behind it and stuff. But you got to remember back then, like there was nothing available. There weren't packages that would do this. There weren't any
Mm-hmm.
best practices. Like you had to figure this out on your own. There wasn't
Mm-hmm.
any rule book, and so it was very early attempts at putting machine learning in production because, like I said, there was not anything out there. And so from there, worked at many other startups doing data stuff, and I would say around 2017 decided just to break out on my own and focus on data engineering because over the years I just realized that data engineering was basically the enabling factor that um, for data science. Like if you didn't have data or a reliable way of getting data, then it's impossible really to do the science upon the data because there's no data. And so, but what I also noticed is a lot of especially in the 2010s, around mid 2010s, especially data science was super hot. Um, and what was interesting to me is I see a lot of these data scientists getting hired at their jobs and they're bored. They don't have anything to do because they don't have any data. And so I think it was just, it was definitely just, I think a lot of premature hires in data science back
Mm-hmm.
then. I mean, there certainly still are now, but back then it was pretty rampant. But a lot of companies, I think, had a lot of fear of missing out on the data wave and the hype cycle, so they had to hire data scientists. And but through all that, I realized too, like again, these data scientists need data and they need systems to support them. They're not trained to do this kind of work, and so yeah, in 2017, went out on my own and started my own solo data engineering consultancy. In 2018, I met my business partner Matt Housley, also the co-author of Fundamentals of Data Engineering, and we started Ternary Data, and that was just solely focused on data engineering, consulting. And so that's been around for you know a few years now, and we have great partnerships with a lot of the biggest you know tech and data partners out there, and have a great list of customer successes and so forth. So yeah, that's kind of the long and short of it. When I got into data engineering, I think that was barely becoming a new title as well, right? So I think if there's one theme to my career, it's always been sort of just I think doing the things that made sense because it was the practical thing to do, maybe not because it was the sexiest thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of data science friends questioning why I would call myself a recovering data scientist when data science was the hottest job in the world, and why I was kind of leaving data science behind at that time. But I felt that that was the move I needed to make. Um, I just kind of had this weird inkling that the data science hype cycle was really going to come to a screeching halt because of a lot of the limiting factors on it, which I
Mm-hmm.
think that proved to be correct in a lot of ways. So
Mm. That's super interesting. Um, I have I have I have so many points I would like to ask you. A few things that you mentioned that I kept in mind were the fact that you started very early to build things in data science and models for business purposes, and that you were able to um, like use business metrics to value how much value does what I'm doing add to the business. So there is this point I really like. Then you talk about how you started like data engineering when we didn't have all the tools we have today, because today it's like I feel like explain data engineering like playing Legos. because
Oh yeah.
mainly it's just taking pieces and put them together and make sure that it's scalable and that you can enhance data and it can match, like for example, the customers you will need. But I might want to ask you more about this, like how did you figure things out? Then all the knowledge you accumulated through the years, coming to starting your business and writing a book about data engineering, or also going against people who are really into data science. Those are topics that I found super interesting, and also the fact that you mentioned that a data scientist is one thing, but it can do anything without data. And today there are a lot of models that are just in libraries and that you can call in a few lines of code. And so a lot of the business problems, uh, there are a lot of things to think about, but the engineering part, like of how combining these models and putting them in productions, maybe there is something I would like to have your opinion on, regarding if today data scientists need to be also data engineers, or how depth should their knowledge be about data engineering when you're a data scientist, to be on top of the market and not be like every other data scientist, and being able to think out of the box. So all those things are main points that I got from what you were saying.
Yeah.
But I think that, yes.
Oh no. Go, go ahead.
I think that what I would really start to ask you about, maybe, is how do you start doing data engineering where no tools exist, and how do you gain knowledge and get your, I don't know how it works, but get the contracts to write a book about data engineering? How did the process going through this, because
Yeah.
it is very not famous at the time where you do it. Can you take us maybe through the
Well,
process of how it goes?
I mean, I think I was fortunate that I sort of understood what the outcome should be too, because I was a data scientist, and you know had just worked on as a practitioner for so long in data, that I sort of knew, okay, like I know what I need, so I just need to work backwards, right? So I just need to apply like proper principles of software engineering and whatever systems that I'm working in, be the cloud or whatever technologies. And so I think having a good understanding of the output really helps in that regard. Um, I think the opposite, where if you're an engineer and you're trying to solve data problems, it's almost harder in some ways, because you don't know quite what the output should be or what the outcome should be. And so I think I was very fortunate just to know, okay, I know what I want, you know, so that knowing what you want is like most of the battle, really, just understanding like the problem you're trying to solve. So then you can kind of just work backwards and, like I said, build systems that support that, solving that problem. And so, you know, um, yeah, but I think your second question, how that influence writing the book. I mean, um, well, I don't know. That's a whole other can of worms we can get into about the book. I think that's
I would be very interesting to learn
yeah.
more
I mean,
about the book.
well, the book's. I mean, so there's a really good book that came out in 2016, 2017 called "Designing Data Intensive Applications" by Martin Kleppman. I still think it's a fantastic book. It was good for the time, especially I think data engineering back then and software engineering on distributed systems was a lot more low level. You needed to know a lot of the concepts that underpinned the technologies. I'd say these days, I would say a knowledge of distributed systems is maybe good to know. You don't need to be an expert in it, because a lot of the magic is taken care of for you. And I would say in a lot of off the shelf tools, especially in open source packages, it's a lot easier than it used to be. But at the same time, what I realized with that book is, okay, so 'cause I was rereading it, I was like, okay, it's a good book. I feel like there needs to be like a prequel to it, like a book that comes before this, where it, 'cause I think the book was actually written for software engineers and just happened to become like the data engineering Bible, sort of by proxy, because there wasn't really much out there. And so I was like, okay, so let's just do a prequel to it. Around the same time, a publisher had reached out asking me and Matt if we wanted to write a book, and we turned that publisher down. We didn't think it was a good fit, but it got us thinking, okay, so maybe we should write a book. And so approached O'Reilly. We had some friends there, and they actually told us not to do the book. They thought it was actually a really bad idea. because it was going to be hard as a first time author. Like, you're trying to write a book that defines an entire field, right?
Hmm.
Like those are like the hard books to write, right?
Exactly.
An easier book would be
How?
like data engineering with like, a cloud platform or technology. And so, what are we going to ask?
Hmm. No, I was about to ask. Okay, so how do you? Because exactly what you said, you will explain an entire field. So, how do you face in terms of framework, for example? How do you face this task? Because it's brand new. I feel like through your whole career and in your life in general, you've always challenged yourself, not waiting for like the market to challenge you, but like went ahead and tried new things and like go for adventures. In that case, how did you like why did you had this feeling that you needed to do the book, and what framework did you use to achieve it?
I mean, there's certainly been data engineering books that had come up before, but they were like, data engineering in AWS or data engineering with Spark or whatever, right? So,
Hmm.
and those are great, but I think that they have a shelf life. Um, I think the big motivation was, okay, if you could write a book that didn't have a shelf life or an expiration date or would be relevant in 5 to 10 years from now, for the most part, right? I mean, every book goes stale, but and that was a challenge really that I think we posed to ourselves, because if we're going to spend the amount of, when you write a book, right, it's like a year of your time or more, year and a half, or whatever amount of time. But regardless, it's the same amount of time, and so you can choose to spend it on something that's, I would say, the easy book to write, or you could spend it on the book that's going to be rewarding to you. Maybe the easy book's rewarding to you. I don't know. That's a personal preference, right? But you're going to put in a lot of time. It's a lot of work, and so we figured, okay, so let's make this one count.
Mm.
I don't want to spend a year and a half of my life working on something that's, I'm going to look back on and be a bit disappointed at that. So, so if you take a step back with data engineering and understand, okay, so like what's not going to change, right? That's sort of the lens that we took. So I don't think there's ever going to be a lack of like source systems that provide you data. I don't think
Yeah.
you're never going to not store data
Yeah.
somewhere. You're never going to not
Hmm.
like transform it and ingest it and serve it and all this other stuff. And so that became like the data engineering lifecycle, which was a really big idea. Undercutting that too were sort of things that across the lifecycle, immutables as well, like security. Right? There's never a situation where you're not going to want to secure your systems or your data. That would be
Yes.
crazy. um, Data management and architecture and all these other things,
Hmm.
were also undercurrents. And so, just taking a step back, I think, and really understanding, okay, so like you can always focus on what's going to change. That's an easy question, but that's the noisy question that gets lost in the shuffle the next day, right? And the answers always change with that kind of stuff. You really want to focus on, at least for this type of a book, you really want to focus on, again, the immutables.
Mm.
So
Okay, so this is how you frameworked how you were going to develop the book, and then in the practice, so like you were two authors, right?
yeah.
And both of you were data engineers.
Yep. Yep.
Hmm. And did you like start directly to do the entire plan of the book and then trying to enhance the value in each part, and like how did you delegate and share the job of taking
I,
all these files and put it into one book?
I mean, as when you have a co-author, it's typically no different than, at the end of the day, the end result is that's your child that you made together. So,
Hmm.
I mean,
There
it's
is a
so.
relationship around it, no?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, it's writing a book is, I think, it's a great experience. It could be a very traumatic experience too. So I can get into that, but I mean, so how it works when you're writing a book is you have your book proposal, and that your publisher needs to accept that, and that's how you get kind of the idea of the book fleshed out, right? So that proposal includes a table of contents, right? So that's kind of a contract that you have where by a certain date you have two chapters written, then by another certain date like half the book's done, and final manuscript at another date, and so forth, right? Then you kind of work backwards to there. You have a development editor that they assign to you, at least O'Reilly does. The development editor is basically your project manager, so just
Hmm.
make sure you're on track, help you with kind of the overall flow of the chapters in the book. And with the understanding that things are going to change too, like your table of contents you come up with is not it's not set in stone.
Hmm.
Things evolve. Like I think we had like 8 or 9 chapters when we started, and this thing ballooned to like more than that for sure.
Hmm.
Um, but in terms of working with a co-author, I would say Matt and I have just absolutely different writing styles, and ways of working. Like I tend to be very regimented, in terms of how I write, and So every day I have it planned out. Like this is what I'm gonna write about. This is what I'm gonna research, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. Matt, he would just wait till the weekend and just like write 30 pages. And so it's just a different way of doing stuff. I would say it was a bit, um, took a bit of getting used to, I think, for both of us. But at the end of the day, we made it work. And um, at the end of the day, you just know you have to make it work. You can't really back out on this thing, so you're gonna have to make it work, right? And
Hmm.
so, but yeah, I would say it wasn't without a lot of arguments, not without a lot of arguments. So I would say about both the content that we're writing. I mean, a lot of debates, about it, and I would say a lot of arguments just about delegation and who's doing what. But that's the part of the process. And if you're not arguing, then I would take that as a sign you probably don't care, right? And so it needs to be a good balance. I would say I'm a very difficult person to work with when it comes to writing books. I will say that up front. I think Matt would say the same thing. I don't know. Just there's certain things where I'm just very particular about how things are going to be. And yeah, so so for my new book, for example, people have asked to co-author it, and I basically told them it's a really bad idea. Nobody should co-author with me right now. So I told them, thanks but no thanks. So doing you a favor.
But do you feel like you will maybe do a second book about prolongation, or
About what?
maybe like about like a next part about what you've learned, or more things about data engineering, or maybe another field? You talked about cybersecurity before and how to relate systems and protect them. I understand that in the data engineering book you enhance things also, but would you consider writing again a book, or was it a one-time thing?
No, I'm writing one right now. It's on data modeling, so I'm actually actively in the middle of it right now. Um, I mean, I think this book's going to be harder in a lot of ways than Fundamentals of Data Engineering, which I think was a very difficult book
Hmm.
by
Are
all
you
accounts to write.
co-authoring it
No, I'm doing this one by myself.
by yourself?
So
So
yeah,
okay. And
yeah.
so data modeling, because I wanted to ask you about, so we understand now better your background, who you are, um, and uh, and it's super inspiring to see how many things can be done through your years, and like being able to manage between all those things that animate you, and that are not only like tech things. Um, so, what are you working on today? So, you shared that you are writing a book about data modeling.
Mhm.
Do you have more things that you are doing today, and what are your goals? Can you share a bit about what are you trying to achieve today?
I mean, the book is really the big focus right now. I mean, I think, and um, so I also have a Substack that I'm writing articles for that just started a few weeks ago. So um, yeah,
What are the Sorry, what are the articles about?
I mean, they're just kind of my rants on data or business or tech, right? So there's not really any rhyme or reason to it. It's not like some people have Substacks and they're all about just very specific themes. Mine's just kind of my
Yeah.
thoughts on the industry, and
Hmm.
and that's fine. A lot of people ask questions, so I figure I'll just put it in article form and podcast
Mm.
form and do that. Yeah, we also have a course on data engineering that we'll be working on as well. So me and Matt are working on that, so that'll be good to work on and get out. But yeah, I mean, my time right now is just spent. I mean, we're kind of divesting of a lot of the consulting and services for Ternary, so I'm glad to do that. We'll still consult, like I think certain types of customers if we feel it's a good fit, but I just feel like we're just at a different stage, in
Mm.
our careers and our business where the things we used to do, it doesn't serve the purpose as much anymore. So and there's plenty of other friends and companies that I would say are great and amazing at doing the things that we don't want to do anymore. And so we're happy to share the pie and and focus on what we really want to be doing right now. So
Mm. Awesome. Awesome. Great. So that covers a little bit the background and what you're doing today. Um, so I would like to ask maybe a bit more. So you've been around. So I understand that during the process of writing the book about the fundamentals of data engineering, so you need a lot of expertise from your past careers, but I would assume that you also shared with a lot of data engineers to check terms, or how are you approaching writing Like, did you use a lot of data engineering's feedback on what you were writing, or did you write and then share with the publishers that were reviewing the content? How did it work?
Um, can you rephrase that a bit? It's kind of a
Yes, I'm
yeah.
sorry. Maybe
Yeah, no,
I didn't explain myself well. So, how did you? Because I would like to ask you about today. What is the great, like, how to be a great data engineer? Like, how to be on top of the market and being in advance. So, could you maybe give insights on that?
it's a
How to be
tricky
great?
question because it's a tricky answer. I mean, I would think that as a data engineer, and this goes for data scientists too, right? I mean, a good data scientist, I think, is the one who's, I think, one, having a lot of fun, and two, just, I think, adding a lot of value to whatever it is that they're doing. It's sort of the intersection of stuff. You could be adding a lot of value but be miserable, and you could be really happy but be adding no value. And so I think that it's the
Mm-hmm.
intersection of those two that really makes a great, well, that's just what makes a great professional in general, really, no matter what your career. I mean, you could be working at a grocery store. I think if you're having a lot of fun doing that and you're adding a lot of value, then you're probably one of the best grocery store people in the world. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
awesome. Same with data. Staying on top of the field is an interesting one. I would say my advice to people who want to stay on top of the field in data, whether it's analytics, engineering, or data science or whatever, is um, I would say spend 70% of your time focused on fundamentals, maybe more. Really understand like what underpins technologies and practices, right? Learn how databases work, for example. Like that's a really good thing to start with, right? Learn how distributed systems work. Learn the guts of how things work. I think once you have the building blocks for kind of at an atomic level, it's easier to build up from there. Um, if you're focused just on like I think superficially on chasing new technologies, but you really don't have the context of sort of the underlying um, you know fundamentals and principles, you're just going to be lost, right? Like you won't have the context. You'll just know how things relate from tool A to tool B, but you really won't know why these are similar or different from each other, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, study the history of the field too. I mean, there's a lot of history. It's not like any of what we're doing is new for the most part. I mean, there's obviously new stuff that comes out all the time, but a lot of it's built on old stuff. For my new book, for example, for data modeling, like I'm going back to even a lot of old papers from 1940s and 50s and 60s and 70s and so forth.
Wow.
A lot of these are relevant, right? Um, read Claude Shannon's book, or 50-page paper on the mathematics of information. Like that's written in 1948, and like one of the the seminal like he described information theory, like bits and bytes, and um, these are the things that undercut the entire industry. Still, these are things that it's all built on,
Mm.
right? For data engineering, like read Ted Codd's papers from 1968, 1970 about the relational database model, or
Mm.
relational model. Really, it's not really tied to a database, but just why did that come about?
Mm.
Study Kimball if you're doing data modeling. I'm talking about data modeling stuff now that I'm focused on, but it's relevant. But if you're an analyst or an analytics engineer, data warehouse has modeling techniques already for data. Like understand what they are. I think once you understand the history, then you can understand where it's applicable. All too often, what I hear now from data engineers, analytics engineers, data science is, well, the old stuff doesn't apply. I'm like, well, how well do you know the old stuff first,
Mm.
right? Um, I think it would be a kind of a baseless claim to say that things don't apply when you don't understand them.
Mm.
So, but if you understand things, I think then you can make a judgment call. But until you understand things, you should politely maybe shut up and go learn history and
Mm.
the underlying theories and fundamentals. So
Mm. Yeah, that's something. Um, through this podcast, that's one thing that I hear a lot. It's like understand the concepts,
yep,
like get back to the concepts and take time to, even if it's 2 weeks, 6 months, understand the concepts, and then you will be able to understand. And wherever the projects are being used today are going, and if we need to use new projects tomorrow, once we have the concepts, there will be no problem to replicate what we want to achieve. The only
yep,
things that is going on today is just better projects and more things that are automated and more intelligent tools in the
for sure.
majority.
I think to add to this too, and I think that's a great point. understand how processes work in general, right? So take a step back and understand, okay, so how, if you're able to map out processes and you're able to map out like how processes pertain to organizations, especially, this is a superpower. I think as engineers, for example, or as data scientists, we want to focus on the technology and the, all the, the quote fun stuff, but the things that really, I would say, will help your career and also help your projects that you're working on is, okay, so how does it relate to what's going on in the organization itself, right? So if
Mm.
I have to work with different teams, what are the barriers to that? What are their workflows? What are mine? And how do these relate? So I'd say,
Yeah.
study things like, there's a really good book called Team Topologies that basically takes what's called Conway's Law, and applies that to software teams. I actually thinking about another series of articles on Conway's Law for data teams and so forth. I think that's, but
Mm.
Conway's Law basically describes that, you're going to design systems according to the way that you communicate. It's a
Mm.
fundamental rule that, I think once you understand this, then it basically makes your life a lot easier in some ways and harder in others. But lean is another thing I hit on a lot. So lean is a practice of removing waste and driving out efficiencies and increasing productivity in systems and processes. And I think that's the thing that everyone should study, because that sort of underpins like you know DevOps, Agile, like data anything ops related. Basically, is just trying to improve time to value, and that's essentially what lean is. I think it's, again, these are not new concepts. These have been around for a long time. Conway, I think, wrote his paper in 1965 or something like that.
Mm.
These aren't new ideas, but they'll save you from having to reinvent the wheel. Because
Mm.
I think the organizational part and the process part, understanding how systems work, that's fundamentally infinitely harder, in my opinion, than understanding how even data engineering or data science works. Like, 'cause you're dealing
Mm.
with people, which is just a much different, um, different ball game. So
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. It also made me think of it's quite related, but at the beginning we talked about how you very early in your career did data science with a business purpose.
yeah,
And so regarding that, I am myself today. I try to build web applications with a business value, like build
nice.
data products. Um, there are like key projects that we use today, but mainly the thing is like how to enhance data, or what kind of problem is out there that we can solve through data, or how could we collect this data to give this specific, like even like build some things that get different projects that already exist, but
Yeah.
all together it's a whole new project, because then it helps. So my question is, what did you learn from building data projects with a business perspective? How to not get lost through the process?
I mean, you got to talk to stakeholders really and understand what they need, right? It's sort of like when we talked about data engineering and data science, right? Like where
Mm.
I was able to understand what I needed because I'd done the job, right? I think you need to put yourself in the stakeholder shoes. A person, there's a notion of a customer, right, in any business, right? So
Mm.
the person that you're serving really is your customer, and
Mm.
so you need to make sure that, and value is really an interesting word. Value is something that's ultimately determined by the customer and what they want. Your job is to provide them, that value through the form of producing something of value. And so, just, um, I would say just it's really simple. Just communicate with people and understand what they want, and make sure you're delivering that. That's
Mm.
you know yeah, and I think the other thing, when you're working at a job, the number one thing you can do is understand how the company makes money. Like, what is it that the company does, and how do they get paid for it, which means that's how you get paid for it. And so as long as you can move the needle in directions that support that,
Mm.
that's another thing. I would say that, especially right now with the economy globally kind of where it is, which is not great. Uh, every company is going to be looking at their team and assessing, okay, so what's this person doing to push us uh, towards success,
Mm-hmm.
especially in times of constraints and so forth. So yeah,
Mm.
maybe, but the answer to your question is that simple and that hard, right? Oftentimes what you might find is your stakeholder really doesn't know what they want, or maybe it's not directly. Maybe what they want is not directly tied to the value that the company wants. And so you really need to, I think, look at it from both angles, where it's, if you understand, okay, the company makes money this way, this is, this, it's the mission of the company and so forth, and really tie that back to, okay, so like the stakeholder wants this, are these the same things, or are these different, or am I satisfying the stakeholder because this is something that they personally want to do to advance their career, or is this aligned with what the company overall wants to do, and the progression of the company
mm,
itself, is aligned towards. And so, I think you always
mm,
need to take a step back and make sure that that's also the case, because you might end up in a dead end, right? Where if you're satisfying the needs of a stakeholder, but that stakeholder has some sort of agenda, which is common, it does
mhm,
happen. At that point, I think you need to figure that out. So
mm. I feel like this is a huge key underlying concept about how to like success
mhm.
kind of way, like the understand the why. We were speaking at the beginning on a personal level, like
Yeah,
what is your why, but then in your company, understanding the why of your managers, the why of the entire company, which is the vision basically, and enhance this on a daily basis, and being able to say no to the things that doesn't match to the why of myself and the company and my long-term goals. I feel that this is a great framework to move yourself into what is good for you and what you should be doing, like trying to figure out one day after another the why of the things and plan the journey based on, does it match the whys? Yes, I will pursue this. How do you feel about these concepts? Maybe you would like to add something to this vision of why.
well, yeah, no, I mean, it's it's definitely, in anyone's career, this is the fundamental thing you need to be able to answer. Really, is like, you know, um, why, and actually in lean, there's a notion of five whys.
Hmm.
So in order to get to the root cause of something, you ask why five times, or some number like that, until you can get to the root cause. It's something you should practice in your own life too. Like, there's your why, but then there's the why do you have your why, and
Hmm.
variations of that. And so, but it's a very introspective exercise. But I think people should do this.
Hmm.
You need to understand, like, why. What's the why behind the why?
Hmm.
Both for your own personal goals, and also, when you're trying to do something at work, right? Like, what? Okay, so like, why are we doing this? And then, keep digging into that, because there's always a reason that's not usually, well, I wouldn't say there's always, but oftentimes what you'll find is there's a reason that is not obvious, or there's another reason why something is happening.
Hmm.
You know, especially as data scientists, or people just in our profession, it's like, we're a service function at the end of the day. We're here to
Hmm.
serve, the the business. We facilitate things, but it's not like. And some people say, "Oh, data should be driving the business." I'm like, I to some extent, if the business is set up for data people to do that, then maybe that's an acceptable way of doing it. I've not really ever seen that happen. Um, so normally you need to understand, okay, so like, why is it that you're doing what you're doing, and then what's the outcome of it? What's the expectation?
Hmm.
Who's asking the question, and why are they asking this? Um, so but it always, it's every answer is going to be unique. There's not a single answer to this, and so
Hmm. And in
so
a way, it's kind of capturing the engineering of the whys, like the big picture of where does this why come from? Because this person want this, and this is related to this topic. And with the clear vision of all the whys, it is way easier to move into this whys. And this is a
yeah,
very why oriented discussion.
yeah.
But I feel like I hope it's not too abstract. For me, it's not.
Well, it
But
might be,
maybe
but
it
oh
is.
well.
Sorry if it's too abstract.
Well, but
Let
these
us
are the
know.
important things you need to realize, though, too. I mean, if you want, I mean, the thing is, with data, especially, and just careers in general, it's like, I think everyone wants a concrete answer to stuff. And here's the deal: it's like, in my career, I've never seen anything like. There's no such thing as a concrete answer to almost anything that's worth talking about,
Mm,
right? There's concrete answers to questions that are really simple to answer, like,
mm,
"Hey, what's the weather like today?" That's a concrete answer, right?
mm.
Um, you know, what does the future look like in 5 years from now?
Yeah.
That's not a concrete answer,
Mm,
right? And it will never be a concrete. Anyone who tells you there's a concrete answer to this is lying to you. either accidentally or on purpose. And if they're doing it on purpose, you should be very scared. So, people that say that there's concrete answers to everything, I tend to immediately um, look at them a bit skeptically and understand like what's their motivation for saying this.
Yeah,
So
I understand. It's like, for example, the example you shared before, values and stakeholders. Like, I want to build a data project to get back on my data project. And I talked to the stakeholders because I followed your advice. But I'm pretty sure that the stakeholders haven't yet realized what they need. And so my job, more than being able to identify, like build everything and the solution, is understand enough of what they're going to tell me and their pain point to know where is the most value and where can I add really value, because they have no idea of what I can do most of the time. How do you
right.
feel regarding understanding pain points of stakeholders and then decide to build a data product around one of those pain points?
I mean, it's absolutely necessary. You have to understand the pain points. I think you got to understand that they also. The thing you got to really understand is whether they also understand what they're asking for. I think to your question.
Mm,
Um, I mean, I've seen this often where people will make requests and then you'll ask them, well, what you kind of dig into it. And you're like, well, maybe you haven't really thought this through that much, or your incentive for doing this is not really quite what I thought it was. It's different, and so I think you just need to understand that. And the other thing too is when you find some hesitation or maybe some lack of clarity on a project, that the person may not understand it or may have another motive. I mean, I hate to say it, but you also need to think, okay, so like, what happens if this doesn't work? What's my alternative? Like,
mm,
do I need to go work on another project or another team? Or, I mean, this is just reality. I've seen this happen countless times where people working on data projects or data products and didn't work out, right? Now you have to go do something else. And why it doesn't work out is commonly because it wasn't really well thought out or I think didn't have the support of other stakeholders,
mm.
right? And so
Does that
that's
ever happen to you? Like working on something for some time and then you had to move on and you weren't quite happy with what you built?
Oh, all the time. Yeah, all the time. I would say in consulting, this is kind of par for the course. It's one reason I'm
Mm,
kind of tired of doing it, and that's why we're a bit more selective about it. Just in a lot of cases, you give companies advice, and they might work on it, and that's great if they do. And in other cases, you give people advice, and um, they don't do anything with it, and it's just the reality of it, right? It's no different than if you're a therapist and you give people advice, and sometimes they do things to change their life for the better, and other times they don't do anything with it, and they're back to where they were. And, they
mm,
never changed, and that's reality. Change is just a very difficult thing.
mm,
And you can't really force it, no
mhm.
matter what you do, because there's so many factors at play.
Yeah.
It's a very dynamic system. You're one variable in a sea of many variables typically, and it's like that's so I've just learned to basically just don't get emotionally attached to outcomes that you can't control. That's the bottom line. Just if you can't control it, or even if you can control it, there's just things that do happen once in a while too. So just try and like be very stoic about outcomes. I think is a very healthy approach to life. So
Mm, mm. Yeah, and I feel that's a danger zone because sometimes we can get very caught up in what we're doing, the work, and feeling like very kind of passionate about it because we dedicate a lot of time, and the output of this can affect a lot of us. And you were sharing about doing how is it called, bouldering? Is it correct?
yeah, yeah, well, yeah, bouldering, yeah,
Bouldering, or spending time with the family or with friends or doing music. And I feel like not getting lost in being only focused in achieving things through works can help manage this emotional impact that it can have um, on the outputs. What
yeah.
is your how do you deal with this? How do you deal with not getting attached to
I
like
mean, it's hard. I mean, I'm like the consummate workaholic, so it's like I used to get emotionally attached to a lot of things that I would identify as work and identify as myself, and the things would be inseparable. But I realized that it's just a very unhealthy way of living. And so,
Mm,
I mean, still though, my work is me and my work, but I guess I just take a much, I think more long term and maybe relaxed view of things where,
mm,
it is what it is.
mm,
Maybe borrowing some, views from Buddhism or something, but it's just like, um, it's, I don't know. It's just you focus on the process and sort of the journey of getting there, not so much on the outcomes. And I think it's just a much easier way of approaching your work. If you get too attached to outcomes and they don't happen, then you're
mm,
bound to be sorely disappointed. And Lord knows I've had enough disappointment in my career. And well, and the thing is, if you just take a different perspective of things, that then it's not a disappointment because you weren't so much attached to the outcome. But then you got to balance that because some people might perceive that as just being lazy. So and but um, so yeah, it's I don't know. You just got to find that balance, I guess, right? Where you care, you're stoked to do it, you're passionate about it, but you're not going to get so caught up if things go wrong,
mm,
because they will.
mm,
And it's just the
mm.
inevitability of it. So
All right.
yeah,
Thanks for sharing all those tips. I have
yeah.
maybe one last questions before asking you the three little questions that we have at the end of the podcast. What is your vision? So now you're writing a book about data modeling. What is your vision regarding the future of data engineering, data modeling, and how do you see this field evolve? And maybe some insights of how it is going to impact AI and the possibilities. Do you have a point of view on that?
I think data modeling is, I think, something that will be probably around more long term than data engineering, even, which it might be a bit surprising for me to say, but
Mm,
just the art of like modeling data so it represents the reality you're trying to describe is something that I don't think goes away, whether you know regardless of AI or anything. Data needs to be input into something, or and
mhm,
so it's just, it is what it is. And data engineering is one of these things where I feel like that there's, and I wrote about this in the last chapter of the book. I feel like the title is like any title in technology, where it could be transient. Maybe data engineering does go away.
mm,
That's how it is. Again, I'm not emotionally attached to it. I didn't come up with the term, and I did write a book on it, but I also have to call it fundamentals of whatever the new title is, I suppose, and that's how it is. But I mean, things are changing fast. Machine learning. I think what's going to drive this really is the intersection of software engineering, data engineering, and data science and machine learning, and and so forth. Right. I think the feedback loop between all these things is going to become a lot shorter and a lot tighter. And so I think very curious to see. I don't know what happens, but I mean, these are the macro trends that I do see happening. So
mm. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for all your insights
yeah,
and sharing about everything. So I have three little questions for you to answer in the end. The first one is, and we've talked a bit about it when you were sharing about you, you get things done in the morning, you read, you exercise. But how do you today improve yourself? I understand that you read a lot. Is there more things to it?
no, I mean it's just simple. I think just trying to learn something new every day, and incorporate that into your life. I mean, just stay healthy, and that's about it, really. I mean, just live to fight another day, and just keep improving. It's no magic to it. So
All right. The second is if anyone that listens to us right now would like to connect with you or see more of your work, where can we contact you or where can we see more of your informations, your podcast, the notes that you take on a daily basis?
yeah, I'm on LinkedIn predominantly, so you can just find me there. Joe Reis, go look me up. The Substack is joereese.substack.com. Those are probably the two places to find me. I'm not on other social media. I have like an account on Mastodon, but I rarely really check it. I'm again not on any other social media. So
Hmm, awesome. And last but not least, do you have any message for the ones that are listening or more in general regarding the field, the career, what we've talked in this episode? It can be basically anything, but do you have any message to share?
I mean, just focus on what's going to make you happy. Play the long game. Just hopefully you'll be around for a while, and just do things that are going to positively impact your ability to continue being around for a long time. I think everything else will fall into place from there. So
Awesome. Thanks
cool.
for this message.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, this is the end of the episode. I want to thank you a lot for coming on the podcast. It has been a pleasure to have you, and I wish to talk to you soon.
Yeah. Thank you, Thomas. Yeah. Great time talking with you.
Bye.
Thanks.